or chapter 1, verse 19. And the part that we're up to is where Ruth has just convinced Naomi to let her go with her back to Bethlehem. We didn't get into this, but possibly part of the reason why Naomi didn't want Ruth to go was because it's kind of like if you live in Bnei Brak, which is a very Haredi neighborhood, and you show up with your non-Jewish daughter-in-law. I mean, that's not necessarily the most politically correct move to show up into the Haredi community with somebody who's not welcome in that community. And Ruth and Naomi, after being a traitor to the people by abandoning them when they were in a famine, she's now going back with her daughter-in-law, who's the enemy. The Moabites were the enemy. Goes back to Parshas Vayera, that they come from incestuous union, and they're the only ones. The Moabites and the Ammonites are the only ones who were told we're never allowed to marry. Okay, so Vatilach Neshteim ad Boana Beis Lachem, and they both of them walked until they came to this place called Bethlehem. Now, who else was from Bethlehem? We said it in this morning, in the shir, that Ibtzon was also from Bethlehem, but that's where Elimelech had set out from. Of course, and later in other traditions, they have somebody else from close by. Okay, join it. Kobi Greba Chomesh. And when they came to Beis Lechem, Vatehom Ko Ha'ir Aleihen. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole city became Tahom. Tahom, Rashi says, a tumult. Naasit Homaya Alayir. The whole city became tumultuous. Basically, they were all in shock. Everybody gathered to bury Boaz's wife. Shemesa Bo Bayom. Boaz's wife had died that day. It doesn't say in the text. I'm reading from the Rashi. The Rashi says Boaz's wife died that day. That's based upon the Ruth Rabbah, the Midrash Ruth Rabbah, and also the Jerusalem Talmud. Also Jerusalem Talmud. Yeah, but take a plate. Take a plate, Colby. Go get a plate. Yeah. Go get a plate, Colby. We'll wait for you. Because those matzah crumbs, they're going to get all over the yeshiva, and then we're going to get unwanted guests here. No, according to the book of Judges, Ibtzon in chapter 12, verse 8, had 30 sons and 30 daughters. The Gemara in Baba Basra says Ibtzon is identical with Boaz. So Boaz had 60 children, and they all got married, and he made 120 parties for them, and then they all died. So he did 120. So he did 120 funerals. But this was the day Ruth came back was the day that Boaz buried his wife. So you might have thought that he'd be done, but no, he got right back in, and pretty soon he's going to end up marrying. Thank you, Colby. Thank you. There were no plates? Are you done? Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Colby. We missed you. Anyway, this is the whole idea that people don't even realize this, but God as always prepares the medicine before the disease. That he had the second wife prepared for Boaz before he even buried the first wife. I have a friend who's he's a widower, and people are always trying to set him up because he's a hot commodity. Not too many of them. So now when they call, he says, just tell me, has the funeral happened already? He's trying to set him up. Okay. So then they looked out there, the whole city was in a tumult, and they said, Azot Naomi, is this Naomi? Rashi says, it's a question. Hazot Naomi, how can this be Naomi? Was this Naomi who used to, because she typically went out. She typically went out. Look what happened to her. This Nami who typically went out in a very aristocratic appearance. Did you see what happened to her because she left the Gemara and Baba Basra, which we said today, because she went to Chutz La'aretz? The Gemara says that the reason why she was punished was because they weren't allowed to leave Israel for outside of Israel. That was one of the theories. The other theory, we saw two other theories why they were punished. One was because they didn't give food to their neighbors, and the other theory, what were the three reasons? One was because they were stingy. The other one, because they didn't cry out for their neighbors. So those are the three theories why they were punished. But so this is like sometimes a person who's very, very successful, and then they go on hard times, and you see them, and they're just a shadow of what they once were. They're like a broken down human being. They're like a shell of their former glory. That's what this image of Naomi returning. She's just a shell of who she was, and they can't even believe it. Vatomer Alayan, and so Naomi says, Al Tikranali Naomi, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means sweet. Karanali Mara, call me Mara, call me bitter. Anybody know any woman named Mara? You see, Mara means bitter. Why would somebody name their child Mara? Mara means bitter. Why would you name somebody Mara?
Isn't it just like Miriam?
No, Mara means bitter. You mean the English name Mara, you saying is as a shortened form of Miriam? I don't know that. Why would anybody name somebody Bella? Bella means war. Yeah. But it also means war. And it can mean both. Okay, so anyway, people do all sorts of names. So then he says, don't call me bitter. Don't call me Nami, call me Mara, ki hemar shadai me'od, because God has made me, God has been very bitter to me. And then the next pasuk says, Ani meleya halachti v'reikam heshavani. I went out full, and God brought me back empty. Reikam heshavani Hashem. Lama tikra'eneli na'ama. Naami, why should you call me Naami? Hashem anabi v'shadai hirali. God has answered me or afflicted me, and God has been dealt bitterly with me. Rashi says, I went out complete, but Osher Uvanim, with wealth and children. Alternatively, she was pregnant with another child. Anabi, God testified against me that I was wicked before him. Alternatively, he punished me. Anabi b'midas adin. That it's an expression of punishment. So now we come to the end of chapter 1. Vatashav Naomi v'Ruta Moavi kalataima. So Naomi returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law. The text is emphasizing, we already know she's the Moabitess. We already know she's from Moabite. It's emphasizing just how low she is. And really, the image is you walk in with your non-Jewish daughter-in-law to the B'nai Brak and say, I'm back. Can you take care of me after I left the Haredi community? They'll be horrified. Nobody wants to do that. Imagine like small towns, they're very fierce about their gossip and about who's allowed to go where, and the ritual and the protocol. And this was a complete breach. And when did she come back? So now that's another theory. Why is this book being read now? Because this book, so they returned at the beginning of the barley harvest. Rashi says, the verse is talking about the harvesting of the barley. Now, so what we're talking about is, then this is why we read it. The book starts off the beginning of the barley harvest. When do we start the barley harvest? The second day of Pesach. And the book ends at the end of the wheat harvest.
which is, or the book, I mean, it doesn't end, the action ends at the end of the wheat harvest, which is when Shavuot is. So these 49 days from Pesach to Shavuot, it takes us from the barley harvest to the wheat harvest. That's, I'm not sure if they do that exactly like that today also, but maybe they have more sophisticated ways with greenhouses and hothouses. But I don't think people plant wheat and barley, and I don't know. I don't know if they do that in greenhouses. Okay, you need more space, I think. Okay, so now we come to chapter 2, verse 1. Unaami. Okay, so this is very there's what's called a hey Barbara, how you doing? So there's a kriuktiv here. So join us, Barbara, please. So there's a kriuktiv. By the way, I want to say, since Barbara's here, let me just pause the recording. Remind me 3 minutes early to stop. I'll tell everybody a story. 3 minutes early. Okay, you'll like this story. You'll like this story. You won't like it. You will hate it, but you'll appreciate that I told it to you. Okay? So, Naomi moda isha. So Naomi, they translate this as had a relative, but this is what's called a kriuktiv. It's written one way, but we read it the other way. It's written as Meida. So we'll have to see what Rashi says. So she had a relative to her husband. Naomi had a relative to her husband, Ish Gibor Chayil, a mighty, accomplished man from the house of Elimelech. This is our yeshiva. Our yeshiva is Yeshiva Elimelech. So she had a mighty man, Mishpachat Elimelech. Everybody here is part of Mishpachat Elimelech, and that's in this story. Mishpachat Elimelech, Ushmo Boaz. His name was Boaz. And your Boaz is a hero because we said earlier this morning that Boaz had many tragedies in his life, and he was still very generous. So in those days, it was the responsibility of the relative to take care of the widows, because or else the widow would go destitute. She wasn't able to work the fields, so the way they took care of her was usually by marrying her. This is, and that way they would provide for her. So it says, this was the ancient custom. This is why Muhammad married his soldiers' wives after they were killed, because that way he took care of them. That's what I was told. Anyway, Moda means a karov, a relative. Ben achiv shel Elimelech hayah. Well, we saw this in the Gemara today in Baba Basra. Boaz was Elimelech's nephew. Elimelech had a brother named Salmon, and he also had a brother who was Naomi's brother, and he had a brother Ploni Almoni. Boaz was the son of Salmon, and so therefore he was a close relative, but he wasn't the closest relative. The closer relative would have been not Elimelech's nephew, but Elimelech's brother. Elimelech's brother was supposed to marry Naomi. He was supposed to marry Naomi through Yibam, and thereby take care of her financial problems. But as you'll see, he didn't want to do it. So, and all of them were descendants of Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the prince of the tribe of Judah, and he was the courageous man, and his merits did not help them when they left the land of Israel. They were punished for that. So she was known. She had a relative. Vatoma Ruth Moaviyah al Naomi. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, well, we already know she's the Moabitess. Why is it emphasizing again that she's the Moabite? It's like she says to Naomi, because what is she willing to do? She says, let me go out. We have no money that you are allowed to collect from the gleanings in the field. She said, let me go out and collect from the stalks. Maybe I'll find favor in somebody's eyes. And so she says, go, my daughter. Why does it emphasize this, the Ruth and Moabitess? Because again, Ruth is the enemy. The Moabite is the enemy. So it would be like, I guess the only way to imagine it is, yeah, like poor Gazan today says, I'm going to go collect food from the settlers' fields, from the Mitnachim fields in Gush Katif. They're almost entirely be not sympathetic, except for the fact that Israel is giving aid. They are giving food. So that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so that's why it emphasizes that she was the Moabitess. But Telach Vatavo, so Rashi there, we did that. And she went and she came, Vatilaket Besadeh Achrei Kotrim. So she collected in the field after the harvesters. Vayiker Mikra. And by chance, she came to the Chalkat Hasadeh Boaz, Asher Mishpachat Elimelech. By chance, she came to the portion of the field that belonged to Boaz from the family of Elimelech. Now, of course, we know that it was not a chance. That's the text is speaking in irony here. By chance, she showed up at that field. We know that this is all being arranged by God, and this was not actually a chance. So, the Rashi tells us that what is it? Because the pasuk says the verse is unusual. The verse says that she went and she came. Doesn't make sense. What does that mean? So Rashi cites the Midrash that it means she was making signs on the road before she came into the field, and she'd go back and forth to the city to make directions so she wouldn't get lost on the road and she would know how to get back. So she was she took a very studious approach. And so she showed up in Boaz's field. Okay, verse 4. Vine Boaz bami Beitlech, and Boaz came from Bethlehem. Vayomer lakotzrim, and he said to the harvesters, Hashem imachem, Hashem is with you. Vayomer lo yivarech Hashem, and they say, may Hashem bless you. Now we study this today, that this was an actual sign of tremendous inspiration on the part of Boaz, because he had just buried his wife, and he comes and he's with the harvesters, and the first thing he does is bless them. He says, God is with you, and they said, Yivarech Hashem. So now the next verse states, Vayananar. So the boy who was there, Hanitzav al Kotrim, who was on top of the harvesters, and he said, Vayomer Naram Moaviyahi. Oh, wait, I skipped a line. Vayomer Boaz Naro. Boaz says to his youth, Hanitzav al Kotrim, who was in charge of the Kotrim, in charge of the harvesters, he says, Lamia Narazot. Who is this young girl? Now, why is this widower noticing the young girl? Did you hear why, Aryeh? Did you ever hear this? Did you ever hear why, Sam? So, because Rashi says, this is what Rashi says, why is Boaz asking about women? I mean, he's not like a teenager. What do you mean? He's like, who's the girl? So, Rashi says, he saw that she was filled with modesty and wisdom, and that's what he noticed. Because why? She only took 2 ears of the grain, but not 3. She knew the law, that if you forgot 3, you're allowed to go back and get them. But if you forgot 2, then the farmer wasn't allowed to go back. So he saw that she was only taking 2 and not 3. And so that was a sign that she was very learned. And then the other thing he saw is that when she was collecting the gleanings, she would stand or completely crouch, but she wouldn't bend over because that was immodest. So he noticed her He noticed her modesty, and that's why he asked about her, not because he was flirtatious. But he was noticing that there was this person. Okay, let me just stop the recording. I'll tell you what happened. So